Yeah, hi peeps, it's Tersse back on the old split box once again, and I'm talking about the Levison report. For any American viewers who might not know what the Levison report is about, we recently had a big kerfuffle over here in Britain. We found that news reporters were tapping into people's phones, basically invading people's privacy in order to get stories for their newspaper. It was against the law, it's illegal. They were also paying police officers for information about the kind of people, or paying police officers for information that they would only have been able to get from police officers who were investigating either royalty, politicians, people who were involved in, say, a murder, and what I'm talking about is not people who are being investigated for being a murderer, but the families of the murdered person. They would be paying police officers for information about the families of people who were murdered, and they were tapping the phones of the family of people who were murdered. They even tapped the phones of people who had been murdered, and led people to believe, because of wiping recorded messages on the phone, making people believe that that person might actually still be alive and wasn't dead, they were just missing. And I've got to say, I find the Levison report doesn't go far enough. They didn't say to the politicians of today that they have got to legislate for what the freedom of press means. Because here's what I get. I understand that there has been a widely acknowledged acceptance that people in the press, media, journalists who want to investigate stories need to have a certain amount of leeway. Like for instance, if you get them to court and a judge asks them, or a lawyer asks them, well, who gave you this information? They're entitled to turn and say, well, my journalistic sort of licence tells me that I've got to protect the sources of my information, otherwise people will no longer give me information in the future. I can understand that. But if the person who gave you that information was a policeman that only gave you that information because you paid him money, you should have to divulge that fucking source. Because that's an illegal source, because it's illegal for a policeman or an officer of the law to give you that information for money. Actually, it's not illegal for them to give you that information free, but it's illegal for them to give you it for money. Right. Also, it's illegal to tap people's telephones. And this should be well known that it's illegal, and if the government says that the freedom of the press is so sacrosanct, we can't even enforce the laws which say that even if a press journalist, investigator does these things, they are illegal, but we are not going to write it into law that it's illegal. Then I find that obnoxious. I find that insulting. What we could do is we could pass a law saying that journalists are able to investigate any story they find worthy of the people's interest that they're going to be writing in the newspaper for. But if they break the law, and it's been sanctioned by their editor and lawyers who work for the newspaper or the media firm, then the journalist isn't held responsible, but the editor and the lawyers who said, yeah, it's perfectly fine to do that as long as we don't let people know you've done it, they are the people who should be held to account. So maybe we don't charge the journalist for tapping the phones, but we charge the editor who paid for the person tapping the phone for the journalist to get paid. Well, we charge that editor because he knew it was going on and he knew it was illegal. And he might even have asked the lawyer if it's okay for them to do it so long as they don't get caught, and the lawyer said yes. The lawyer should be disbarred as well, because this is something that we found happening with the I can't mind the name of the newspaper, but the News of the World or something like yeah, if a lawyer says it's perfectly okay to do it so long as you don't get caught, that lawyer should be disbarred. He should have used his lawyer's license taken off him. If an editor paid money to a private agency to tap phones for a reporter in order to get stories, not only should the private investigator who tapped the phones be liable to go to jail, but the editor who paid them for the journalist should be liable to go to jail. The journalist, let's give them their journalistic freedom, but let's see how much journalistic freedom they get to tap people's phones when the editor is liable to go to jail for paying for them to tap phones. I'm just saying there is ways that we can actually say to them, yeah, you can investigate as much as you want, but you have to investigate in the manner that used to be done when we believed in the freedom of the press, which was going out there, walking to somebody's door, chapping the door and asking them questions, not tapping their phones. Investigative journalism used to be a well-respected form of finding information that was of interest to the public. People would go and they would surreptitiously talk to people behind closed doors and say, I won't divulge your name for telling me this information. I will protect you by saying in court, well, this information came from an individual who I am protecting. I won't divulge his name, and you can put me into jail for contempt of court, but I will not divulge my sources. I can understand that that is a legal right that journalistic newspaper journalists should have, but I don't think it's I don't think we need to protect them when they're breaking the law to get their information. When you're tapping people's phones, which even the government shouldn't be able to do without getting a judge's permission, that's breaking the law. Talking to someone, even someone high in government, even someone who's involved in the intelligence agencies, getting them to give you information which is of public interest, and protecting them, protecting whistleblowers by not divulging their names, that should be protected. But the ability for you to break the law to get information, no, that's not able to be protected. So I do believe that the government needs to pass legislation. The government needs to put into law the fact that newspaper journalists, newspaper editors, newspaper owners, lawyers who supply legal advice to these newspapers and journalists, they all need to be held account for their actions. And if their actions are illegal, they should pay the price. They should be held responsible for their actions. Journalistic license is when you perhaps say a little bit more, use a little bit of your own imagination when describing a thing, You may use some of your own imagination, of what could possibly have been going on or happening. But I don't think that comes under the same auspices of breaking the law to get information which is titillating and may sell newspapers, but isn't really in the interests of the public to know about. And this is what the Levison report, I think, failed to go far enough in explaining to the government who asked for this report. Levison didn't go far enough in saying these understood sort of rules of journalistic freedom don't extend beyond talking to people. in getting a story from a person, or information through the medium of a telephone, a video, or a letter. But no, so long as it's legally and it's been passed and given to you with the understanding and the full knowledge of the person who's given you the information, that should be protected, yes, but not illegal means of finding out information about people. There's plenty of ways to find out what people are doing by talking to people they know who might know what they're doing. That's journalism. That's investigative journalism. When you go out there and find a source, find a person who will give you information, that I think should be protected. But when you're going out there and illegally finding information which may be of interest to the public, may not be interest to the public, I think that's illegal. And we should pass legislation to say that you can't do it, and if you do it, we will bring the full weight of the law down upon you. Perhaps not the journalists themselves, because a journalist very rarely, if ever, goes out looking for a story themselves without their editor knowing about it. And if their editor is saying to them, yeah, fine, you go and do something illegal, I'm sanctioning you to break the law to get that story, then when it comes out that the journalist has done something illegal, with the sanction of their editor should be the person who gets dragged into court. Right? And that should be what should be put in the law. We protect a journalist, because the journalist can only do what their editor tells them. If they're working outside, if they're a private story collector, then they're not a journalist. They're working outside of the journalistic moors, and they are a private person stealing information from someone else, which is against the law. They don't come under journalistic freedom. So yeah, I would say that there is a way to solve this. Levison did actually say that unless it is legislated for, there is no real way to provide full protection to the public, nor full protection to the journalist himself. And so I would say that the British government's position is unfounded, and they need to legislate. If they don't legislate, then it's simply because they know full well they want to have control over that sort of thing behind closed doors. They don't want it ever to come out in the public. They want to be able to use surreptitious legislation and rules, such as happens in America with the TSA and the Homeland Security thing. That's what Britain's trying to do as well. If a journalist ever found out information about the government, about the Prime Minister, I'm fucking damn sure they'd be arrested toot sweet, disappeared away into some fucking some jail somewhere, and berated until they promised never to speak or mention anything about it. Maybe even disappear and die, you know what I mean? Because they couldn't be trusted. But it would never happen for, say for instance, somebody taps into the phone of a dead soldier's relatives or a murdered teenager's relatives. That needs to be legislated for. There's absolutely no way that is covered by journalistic fucking freedom. No fucking way. That needs to be legislated for. And you can't depend on newspapers and other journalistic organisations to do it off their own fucking bat. They will definitely give lip service to it and say, oh, definitely, don't legislate us. We'll deal with it ourselves. We'll put in place rules and regulations that we all have to adhere to. And yet these are the same rules and regulations they've had to adhere to for 300 years. And yet they broke them. The mediums we're using now in their journalism, video, recordings, phones, phone tapping, that didn't exist when we understood the journalists had to have the protection so they could investigate. These people were going around talking to people and getting people to talk to them and then taking notes. They weren't tapping into people's fucking phones. They weren't secretly hiding, recording fucking instruments. You know what I mean? And not letting you know you were being recorded when you were being interviewed. That needs to be legislated for, because it should be illegal. I'm a bit drunk and I'm maybe not sort of parsing this properly, and I'm not putting into proper words that everyone can understand. But basically, if you're a journalist and you meet someone who tells you something and you write that down and then you print it and then you protect that person and say, I'm not going to tell you who told me, that should be, that's the freedom of the press. That's protected. If you're planting bugs in people's homes or cars, or you're tapping their phones, or you know, you're hacking into their computers, or you know, that's illegal. You need to legislate that that's illegal, and even if you're a journalist doing that, it's illegal. The government can't do it, journalists can't fucking do it. If the government and the journalists can do it, then I can fucking do it. There shouldn't be any laws against hacking then, you know what I mean? There shouldn't be any laws against people fucking tapping into your phone, or you know, accessing your fucking, you know, your bank accounts and all that. No, if it's okay for journalists and fucking politicians to do it, then it's okay for all of us to do it. So, no, if it's not good for me to do it, then it's not good for them to do it. Without a judge's fucking warrant, without due cause. So, the Levison report, yeah, I believe they should implement quite a lot of the Levison report, but it doesn't go far enough. I think in this day and age of electronic media, we need a hell of a lot more legislation to protect the public from intrusions from outside sources into what I would consider my electronic, my digital information, which is mine, my digital possessions, my digital fucking, you know, stuff. It's mine. I should have it protected from invasion from other people, unless they have information or, you know, due cause, reasonable cause to get a judge to give them a fucking, you know, subpoena to access my information. I just think it's fair. I can't fucking bust into my house without fucking, you know, a bit of paper saying that a judge has said it's okay to come and search. Why can they get into my computer or my phone records or my bank records? You know, I need that protection, never mind fucking journalists. And I need that protection from journalists as well as the fucking government. I'm just saying, you know, if I don't feel confident that I can use them, then why the fuck should I buy and use it? And then surely that gives people who sell this, you know, this media, sells PCs and space on a server, a phone fucking company, you know, why should I trust that phone company when I think that anything I say or photograph or anything within the voice recording of my phone could be taped, recorded and used against me, you know? No, we need to have legislation to protect the citizen from not just the government but journalists as well. They need to know that if they can't just chat my door and talk to me and get that information, then they can't be finding it by fucking tapping my information. You know, it needs to be legislated for. The world is different from the times of, you know, 100 years ago when you'd flat-foot postmen, Mr. Plod, chapping doors and interviewing people, and journalists walking the beat and talking to people and finding out information. That was the freedom of the press. You get the freedom to talk to MD and try and convince them to tell you their story. You don't have the freedom to tap their phones, hack their computers, you know what I mean, or sneak into their houses and steal shit. Strange for det.